Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage Hillary Pennington.
Okay, so we are going to get into it, into a conversation about how to really explore the equity and economic advancement imperatives that go together, or sometimes don't, around the issue of the future of work and the future of learning. And these are three amazing people. I know them all. And I want to just quickly share their brief segments of their bios. So first, to my left is Tamara Drought, otherwise known as Tammy, who is at Demos. And Demos is a public policy organization working for an America where all of us have an equal say in our democracy and an equal chance in our economy. And she is their Vice President of Policy and Research, author of 2 groundbreaking books, Sleeping Giant, How America's New Working Class Will Transform America, and Strapped, Why America's 20 and 30-somethings Can't Get Ahead. And she is a rockingly smart person and innovative thinker about policy. Clyde McQueen is a serial innovator in the trenches, on the ground, in a community. He leads the Full Employment Council that governs the local workforce system in Kansas City, Missouri, a city that has experienced economic and job growth with persistent opportunity gaps for Blacks, Latinos, and low-income whites. And it is an area that covers urban, rural, and suburban centers, and he has done it all. And we're going to hear from him. And last but not least is Nisha Patel. In her testimony last month before the House and Ways and Means Committee, she reminded committee members that the F in TANF stands for family. She oversaw the $14 billion DHHS Office of Family Assistance that included TANF. And today she continues 2 decades of leading, developing, and implementing initiatives to increase economic opportunities for low-income families at the Urban Institute as the executive director of the U.S. Partnership on Mobility from Poverty. And I had the privilege of working with her at the Gates Foundation, and she is a rock star also. So we're going to kind of just start to mix it up. And I'm going to start with you, Nisha. So you heard Stephanie really describe the way it is. And I'm curious, as you did all of the work that the Mobility Partnership did, tell us some of the key takeaways from that work about the future of work and the kinds of things that we are all called to innovate on that you would take from that experience.
Yeah, and I think I'll get into the future of work, but I want to start by putting out what I think is one of the big insights coming out of our work that's relevant to all of the ideas we put forward, but definitely to the future of work conversations that we're having here at this conference. And which is when you think about what is mobility from poverty, we often very quickly go to economic success. And that makes absolute sense. We want all of us to have access to better jobs and higher income and to build wealth. So that's foundational. So the solutions around the future of work need to do that. So economic success is one principle. But equally important to economic success is this notion of power and autonomy. And one of our partnership members, John Powell, said this at our very first gathering. We said, well, how will we know if we're successful in helping people to become more mobile, upwardly mobile? And if you look at the map that Stephanie showed, that's one that we spent a lot of time looking at, how much place matters. So your economic success is important, but the thing that John Powell said is, here's the thing about poverty. It's not just a lack of money, it's also a lack of power. And if that's true, we also have to help people build power and autonomy, sense of agency, having a say over what happens in your life. And then third and equally important is this idea of belonging or being valued in community, having dignity being needed. So all of our solutions should embody all 3 of those principles, I would argue. So some of the solutions we put forward, you heard a bunch of the trends this morning, right? So there are many, many more people now working in 1099 jobs versus W-2 jobs, which means they then don't have access to the same benefits, protections, rights that many of us in W-2 jobs take for granted. So one idea we put forward is looking at a new system of worker classification so that more workers could have access to those benefits. Second, related to that is, since many of us are changing jobs, including me, constantly, right, and working for multiple employers, how do we look at portable benefits? It's an area that's ripe for experimentation. And then third, looking at the decline of unionization and the changing nature of the labor market, how do we look at new avenues for worker voice? Fourth, thinking about, right now we're in a tight economy in most places, so it's not top of mind. But for many people, there's still you heard the difference in unemployment rates here in New Orleans, and it's true across the country. Generally, for Black men, it's often at least 2x what it is for white men. And so for people that have more challenges entering into the labor market, how do we think about subsidized jobs or even job guarantees so people have a way to access income? And then how do we, and this is I think something I'm preaching to the choir here, but keep pushing on more systemic change to better link the training that is offered to both current employer demand and, to the extent we can predict it, future employer demand.
That's great. Let me stop you there. And Clyde, I want to move to you. So you are a serial innovator. You have been working on these issues for a while. And you've been doing it from the place where people really live, in a place. Tell us what are a couple of the most important lessons you take from that experience around what we should be worried about and what we should be paying attention to in this time.
Yes, and I come at this from a rural, urban, and suburban perspective. Yeah. We serve a rural county that has 20,000 people in it. It's 100 miles from the urban center, primarily agricultural based. Serve an urban community that is predominantly 40% people of color, but happens to reside in 4 counties. And then we also look at it from the perspective of class, middle, lower income. And the thing that we have realized is that though we're in the 21st century, the system is based upon 20th century concepts.
Yeah.
When this country was an agricultural economy and it was based on spring, summer, and fall semesters, when you could go across the street and get a job, where now most manufacturing tends to locate further away from the urban core. And most importantly, where the timing and the calendar of training, whether semester-based or whatever, is not focused on those people who have much need financially, but more what's convenient for the people who run the system.
Yep.
And we have found that when we deal with those aspects, that we're able to get more labor market participation. And in this conversation about full employment in this country, the one thing that we must understand is the populations that we serve still tend to have very low labor market participation. Mm-hmm. The bulk of the people of color that we service, and even women, is about 60% labor market participation in a 3% full employment economy.
And the solutions have to start from where they are.
That's correct. And where they are, where they live,
yep,
their financial situation, and what it's going to take for them to retain employment beyond the intervention of public assistance or other aspects of it.
So that's great. That gets us, again, I think we're starting to build some of the pillars that are what need to change. So Tammy, you spent a lot of time looking at these issues, particularly the working class and also the young people, and the ways in which our economy is changing. Sometimes it's like it's invisible in plain sight. Tell us a little bit about what you see from where you sit, what's happening, what should we be worried about, and what are the big ideas you're thinking about?
Okay, good afternoon. So I have spent a lot of time thinking about what has happened, particularly to working class jobs. My own background is I'm a first generation college graduate. My dad was a steel worker. My mom an office manager at the local orthodontist office, which made me get great teeth for free. Thank goodness, because that stuff is expensive, I'm learning now with my own daughter. I think one of the seismic shifts that we underappreciate is the decline in job quality for people that don't have four-year college degrees. I am a huge proponent, and I spend a lot of time advocating for a return to a debt-free college education at state universities and colleges in this country. Thank you. That said, we also have to recommit to the ability for people who don't have college degrees to live a decent life in this country. And I think that means a couple things. When I talk to people who are working in, we love to sort of talk about STEM. We're fascinated. It's the shiny gadget in the economy, right? It's about 6% of the economy. Here are the jobs that are adding the most to our economy: retail, fast food, janitorial, childcare, home health aid. What do these have in common?
Low pay.
Low pay. And you don't need a degree. So one of the things I heard over and over from working people was the feeling of disrespect. no matter what job they did, that they didn't matter. And they see that not only reflected in their paycheck, but in the scheduling that changes week to week. And the fact that they don't have paid sick days to care for themselves or a sick kid or a sick parent. So we've really gotten to this place where disrespect has kind of been baked into working class jobs. And a lot of that is the decline of worker voice. You know, if you think about it, there is no countervailing force now in our capitalist economy where workers can really join together and negotiate on behalf of themselves. So I think this cleavage, this like break between the quality of life available to people with college degrees and the decline in quality of life for people across all races without college degrees is something we really need to tackle and recommit to fixing.
Okay, great. So let's get into it. Let's talk about power. Systems don't change themselves, right? You have to make systems change. So where do you think emerging organizing can happen, especially in this fast-moving economy with all of the automation that we're describing, and you know, as Stephanie was just saying, the kinds of jobs that are most at risk are the very jobs most dominated by low-income people, people of color, and women. So let's talk about power in this equation. Nisha, do you see new forms of organizing beginning?
Yeah, and I think a place to look, thinking about sort of the intersection of technology with everything, is online. So if you're working in a low-wage job and you have no control over your schedule and you're also trying to support a family and get food on the table and do everything else, where is the time going to come to join a movement? Right? And so, and I know it's easy to sort of say, well, yeah, if it's the kind of thing where you just like a page or like retweet something, that's maybe minimal, but it can create a way for workers who are working in very different places, but maybe for the same company, to connect. So I think that's sort of one model to look at.
And Clyde, you work with employers, and there are many good employers who are part of trying to change this system. Where do you see the most exciting things that employers are doing around this set of issues? And do you think employers will change themselves?
Well, three things that we have seen is, one is increasingly the need for childcare and transportation, and the whole issue of shift management in terms of the people, in terms of when they offer things of that nature. We're so spread out. We're 2,700 square miles. All the people who have what I call moderate price housing tend to live in the center of the city. All the jobs are 10 or 15 miles out. You go through 5 counties, they see you with one tag from one county, they scan you. I get stopped going to my house all the time because I happen to like big tires and a truck. When I came
that doesn't
back,
look right.
well, you know, and then don't put a Miami, Florida tag on your car. You really get stopped in Missouri. So I think those types of things have an impact. And the other thing I think is important for us to understand, and you mentioned power, I think we have to go where we're not. We can't just keep showing up to where everybody agrees with us.
Yes.
We got to go to, I started going to Chamber of Commerce meetings and Economic Development Corporation meetings, and people used to ask me, why are you here? You're a job training dude. I said, no, I'm a job dude, and you're the one with the jobs.
That's
and
why
now I'm
Yeah.
on the executive committee of the Chamber of Commerce. I chaired the Economic Development Corporation. And from that, we developed policies. And I later found out you really don't want to chair these things because you really can't do nothing. You need to be kind of inside and outside. But we really need to be where everybody doesn't agree with us. And I think that sometimes, because they need that voice to bring them to reality, and sometimes people don't really know what it's like for low middle income people, because the ones who are in power aren't from that realm.
They're not from that place. So Tammy, I want to piggyback on that to ask you. So this is, I think, one of the challenging moments that we are in. So let's just characterize it, you know, stereotype. It's not wholly true. But let's just say there are a lot of white guys who are making it rich in Silicon Valley, and they too worry about the disappearance of jobs and work. They know their innovations are going to cause that to happen, and they think the solution is universal basic income. What do you think about that idea?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. I'm not a fan of universal basic income for a couple reasons. One is political. Very rarely, I have never used the words "that will never happen." I believe that all change is possible. That said, I think the ability for America to adopt a UBI at a level that actually does what it's supposed to do is highly, highly unlikely. I think the problem is with a UBI is I can quickly see sort of a dystopian fiction novel writing itself, where you have society broken into the people who earn their living and the people who live on UBI. And we already have a problem in this country about who deserves help and dignity. I think UBI could devastate and actually open wide that divide even more, and then think about that along class, race, and gender lines. So I think it is a trajectory that is not helpful. I'm much more inclined to talk about a job guarantee. Like it or not, working in this country is the way we all derive meaning, dignity, assign it, feel it, all of that. It is embedded in the American spirit. So I think people want to have a job. They want to contribute. The question is, how do we turn the work that needs to be done in our society, whether it's harnessing technology to green our economy? There's lots of work to be done right now in that. There's not a lot of jobs. And so I think really looking at the role of the public sector and public investment and some kind of jobs program that is targeted to the communities that have really been left behind, that still have double-digit unemployment figures despite being 10 years into a so-called recovery. I'm eager to figure out how we get the work done in this country by creating jobs to do it.
So I'd like to ask this question to each of you, really, because I think you just put your finger on a central tension: who deserves help in this country, and the challenges we've had in building really universal systems that serve everyone. So, Clyde, from your point of view, if you were, what's your feeling about jobs guarantees as a piece of the solution, or figuring out? I think, Tammy, you're almost describing a modern WPA in a sense. What's your feeling about that?
Well, I think, first of all, we make an assumption that a market-based economy is devoid of any type of public sector investment, and it's not.
And it's not.
You can see any growing community, you have an adequate government investment that is parallel with private sector investment, and people can go both ways. All of a sudden, we have assumed that capitalism, as it is interpreted, is devoid of public sector input, and it's not. You look at the space program, and every other major program we have is a public-private partnership. But I think it's even important to understand it from the people's standpoint, and I really want to make this point. There are so many people making policy without talking to the people they're making policy for.
Amen.
Something as simple as childcare, and they say make childcare available, so it's 8 to 5, when the shift time is early in the morning and late at night. We made childcare available, so them folks really don't want to work. Or we say something like, make transportation, we give a lady a bus pass, and they go through hostile territory. And we just had an article where 2/3 of the tickets that were written in our region were written out of 4 zip codes because it was the poorest zip codes. And if we get in there and look at that from that aspect, because the people are not stupid.
No, it's the structures.
The structure. And they make decisions because nobody wants to set themselves up for failure on an ongoing basis. They know if my child care is not available. They know the place is 30 miles away from where I live. So they don't show up. I wouldn't either.
Right.
So I think we have to really do like marketer analysts do. You constantly touch your market to see what type of thing you need to change to better adjust. And we must have an organic system that makes those market adjustments based upon times change. What happened 3 years ago is different now. What training was good today, so I think those are the things we have to look at.
I couldn't agree with you more, and one of the things I'm finding encouraging about today is the energy feels different. It feels more oriented towards innovation, and that kind of innovation. We've heard that from a lot of our speakers, super smart people looking at flaws in the system and taking, in a sense, a human-centered design approach. So Nisha, when you think about that and you think about the big policy things like jobs guarantees, what would be your feeling about the competing ideas and how best to structure them.
Yeah, we actually spent a fair amount of time over the last 2 years in our work debating UBI, and we actually had Chris Hughes come and talk to our group, he's been a proponent of it. And it's interesting that I feel like on UBI, and I've spent the last 2 years in traveling all around the country to 30 different communities, urban, rural, suburban, tribal. And I feel like the UBI conversation is mostly happening in two places. In DC, where I live, where they're like, never gonna happen. And in Silicon Valley, where they're like, this is the answer.
This is the new best thing.
And I think that, I tend to agree with everything that's already been said, actually. And I think why are some people so enamored with UBI? Why does it seem like it's gonna be this great savior? I think we spent time looking at, well, what's the North Star goal? And I think most people in this room would agree. Actually, right, if you think that everyone deserves to have like a basic level of income to meet their needs, like raise your hand. Okay, like most people would agree with that. But then the question is, how do you get to that North Star? And so the challenge are some of the ones that Tammy already identified. I think they're political and financial. So even if it were politically feasible to somehow move that forward, and if it's publicly funded, how would we do that? 330 million people, we talked about this in a group, times any number is a ginormous budget outlay. So what are you gonna now stop funding to pay for that? Are you gonna, like I would worry, are we not gonna have SNAP? Are we not gonna have childcare subsidies? So that someone like me who needs neither of those things can now have some extra income on top of my well-paid job? That just seems ludicrous to me, and that's the universal piece.
Yep.
But now for folks that don't have access to a basic income, how do we get to that North Star goal? And a job guarantee, a subsidized job, to me seems like a very practical and reasonable way to get there. You can also think about things that might be more targeted, that other countries around the world do. You can think about a child allowance. You can think about, so we just had a big tax bill that was passed, thinking about using the tax code to provide higher, expanding the earned income tax credit to more workers, expanding the child tax credit more so than it was done in the current tax bill to get more income, particularly to families with young children, where we know it can make the greatest difference. So I think there are ways to say, well, what's the goal? And then think about what the practical solutions are.
So Clyde, if you're thinking about user-centered design, and you could put the people and families you work with every day in a room with those Silicon Valley people and designers, what would you hope they would hear?
Well, I think particularly, again, and I'm talking about people with least amount of financial means. The earn while you learn, which is nothing but cooperative education, which is apprenticeship, the nowadays term, which means you go into school and you're able to earn income at the same time.
Right.
The reason why enrollment rates are dropping so low right now in college is because people can't afford to go, even with a Pell Grant. Pell Grant pays $5 grand, tuition is 12. You under the ground in 7. Multiply times 4, that's 28,000. A lot of people say, I ain't going that route because they're on the street. Everybody's saying college causes you a lot of debt. I can't get a house, I can't get a car, and I can't pay rent. I'm not going to go there. So we have to make college more affordable, or at least make the tuition rates available. Even government assistance helps you pay the full load because people deliberately are making the decision not to attend. Because it's buttressed by the fact that people who have gone to college, got a 4-year degree, in my office working at the same first job, Mickey D's, are the ones who didn't go.
Yeah, which comes back a lot to the issues you were saying about lack of respect and lack of dignity. So if you had a crystal ball, which none of us does, and you were painting scenarios, we were imagining ourselves, let's say 10 years out from now, what, and particularly if we come back to the moonshot idea that Maria put up there, I didn't write it down perfectly, but that automation, economic mobility, and dignified work would be partners in creating a thriving America for all. So automation, economic mobility, and dignified work. What, if you were just painting a scenario of what got us there, to that moonshot, what do you think it would be? How would you tell that story? Let's start with you.
So I think it would be the United States going on a collective learning journey about our history, about its legacy. I'm talking about racism and how racism has been used very effectively to undermine support for government. I think government, the retrenchment of government, the lack of public investment, the reason we don't have childcare for everybody who needs it at the hours they need it, like almost every industrialized nation does. We don't have paid family leave. We're the only country on the planet that doesn't offer paid family leave. All of these things, I think, get back to this idea, and a very popular animating idea is to really show that the people benefiting from government are undeserving, othering them, painting a picture of the race and immigration status of who benefits from government, and getting white people to really say, I'm out. I don't want my taxes doing this, 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 or that. And by the way, this is really hurting white people, white working class people especially. The sort of disinvestment in the public structures that we all benefit from education to roads, to the need to harness a green economy so that we save the planet.
Yeah.
So I would say we need as a nation to remember that there's a we, and that we have to actually come together and not be so divided from each other, and realize that there are very powerful interests that want to divide us by race, by class, by gender, immigration status, you name it, but that we have to get back to the we. And the only institution that really cares about the we and the public interest is our government. And I think reinvesting and recommitting ourselves to this bold experiment of democracy, and that out of many people come one, is actually the key to getting us back on track and creating a decent, dignified life for everybody in this country.
That's beautiful. So how did it happen? Were there leaders who suddenly became that? Were there people who rose up and said, we insist on this? How did we get there?
The change. I think the people. So
the people.
Yes, we the people. My first boss at Demos was a quintessential baby boomer. If there was a protest movement, he was at the heart of it, whether it was the anti-war movement, the civil rights movement, Miles Rappaport. And he would tell these stories, and I'd think, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, I just couldn't wrap my mind around it. Well, fast forward to today, and I kind of get it. And I think we are seeing a renewing of civic engagement that my whole body actually right now is breaking out in goosebumps thinking about it, because I'm actually optimistic.
Yeah.
From the Fight for 15, which is a cross-racial working class movement, to the Dreamers, to the Pussy Hat March, and to Black Lives Matter. We are seeing just a resurgence of people who are trying to take back their democracy. People are running at all levels of government. So I don't think it's going to be one leader or one thing, but I think it's a new awakening. I actually think sometimes you have to hit rock bottom in order to climb your way out and envision a better future. And I think every day it seems like we keep getting further to the bottom, but we also have a new swell of civic engagement that I find extraordinary.
No, that's beautiful. And societies should decide what they want automation to do for them, not the other way around.
Exactly.
Clyde, what would be your scenario, and how did we get there?
Well, I think if you go across our country, there are examples of where these things are happening. The problem is they get overwhelmed by the focus on the negative or division. And so my hope would be that somehow we can bring those things that are diverse, that show black, white, male, female, because I'm gonna tell you, there's a lot of disruption coming between male and men right now.
We've noticed.
And and black and white, and Latino, and we have to be overt, deliberate about making sure we put those things, and we got to be more intentional to get the good things, that example, the best practices out there for people to observe that it is possible.
It is possible,
and it's like, it's so impossible to do the right thing. It is possible to do the right thing, but we have to put it out there in terms that the people see it's possible. And I'm talking about those who don't show up for a job because they feel, hey, they're not gonna give me a shot, they're gonna work me for 3 hours, and they're gonna call me all kind of names, so I'm not ready for that drama. If we start doing that to friends and families, make the PTA meetings different,
Yes.
You know, maybe have companies, people do not know about the 21st century labor market. I have so many of my friends who are ministers and even teachers said, Clyde, we don't have a clue about what you're talking about. I can't say you stupid. I gotta say, Clyde, you know, be a little bit more direct in dealing with the people that you talk about and not get offended when somebody tells me you need a little bit of continuous improvement about the way you approach them. and I think if we do that, I mean, the deal is it's there. It's not like it's an impossible dream. No. It's not, but are we willing to put it out and then do those things necessary that make us go across the street to the people that we don't talk to every day in church or the coffee shop?
I agree. And that is both of you are fundamentally optimistic about finding activating what we have in common, and showing how much can be, that it is there already, it's happening already. So Nisha, add to that. What's your scenario and how did we get there?
Yeah, I think and we've actually just put forward a paper, Restoring the American Dream, so that's what we're talking about, right? And I would say it's 5 big strategies, and I don't think that there's a shortage of good ideas. Everyone in this room has probably been part of or is currently part of an initiative, something that you're working on that is in service of that, like helping more of us access the American dream. But the thing that is often in short supply is the political will. And that is related to narrative. So the first and foremost, the thing that I think that we've got to do is to change the narrative. And particularly when it comes to upward mobility, when it comes to poverty in this country, which relates to all of these issues. And this what we talked about before, this othering, right? Whether it's because someone is of a different race or a different gender or is from a different place, like fill in the blank. We've got to find a common narrative, and it is about the we. And I've sort of taken to saying we have got to get to a place in this country where there is no us and them. There is only us, right? And that's probably the hardest one to do. But if we can do that, that will create space for the 4 other things that I think need to happen, right? And the first is creating access to good jobs. That is what a lot of this conversation is about. And people in this room, we know how to do that. No one needs to teach anyone in this room how to do that. But we need the political will to do that. Next, after that, you can sort of say it's narrative, it's jobs, it's place. So much differs by the context, the place where we are born and where we grow up in terms of our later outcomes. And so investing in place-based strategies, place-conscious strategies. And then next after that is people. And this speaks really to the human-centered design. If we're going to be about power and autonomy, then we have to put people and families at the center of these strategies. And as Clyde said, very often in policy and in philanthropy, the people who are most impacted by the problem are left out of the conversation. And so we just need to just stop doing that. And even on this panel, like we can speak to our experiences with people, and maybe some of us have experienced poverty ourselves, but these panels ought to look different. And then undergirding all of that is data. We need to transform the way that we use data, which impacts all of these other pieces.
Thank you, all 3 of you. I mean, I think this has been a really far-reaching conversation. I hope it is as inspiring to all of you as it is to me. I have to say, I am sitting here thinking how happy Arthur would be if he could hear what we were talking, how frustrated he would be that we aren't yet farther. But he was a person for whom it was all about what changed as a result of the work and the analysis. And I think you've pointed to us the things that need to change, but also a very positive and achievable path to helping them change. So let's just thank this amazing panel. Thank you.